into the
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. We'll give everybody maybe another minute before we kick off. All right. Hi, everyone again. Hope you're well. Thank you for joining today's webinar we're running on making schools compliant with record-keeping recommendations using Microsoft 365. We know everybody's busy and there are lots of things going on, so we appreciate you taking out the time from your busy day today. My name is Sulabh Jain, and in my role here at Antares as the education lead, I work with education institutions all over the world on a daily basis to solve industry problems on the Microsoft platform. In our experience working with many K-12 education institutions, we're finding two key challenges that schools are facing. We're finding there's a lack of awareness and knowledge of some of the key industry recommendations and compliance requirements. And for those schools that are aware of these requirements, we're finding that schools wanting to know more about how do they become compliant, how do they go about the whole journey, what are some of the immediate steps that they can take to become compliant in this direction. So today we have a unique opportunity to discuss these challenges with our modern work team who are working with customers on these challenges on a daily basis. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters today. Janika Amarasekera, he heads up the modern work practice that encompasses a range of solutions on Office 365 from document management, record keeping, intranets, business process automations, migrations, and so on. And Peter Vincent, who is one of our principal consultants. Peter's been working on Office 365 since its inception and has nearly 15 years experience working on Microsoft technologies. He's one of our experts in SharePoint and Teams implementations and works on many challenging projects with customers on the ground. So here is the agenda for today's session. Janika will first go through the key industry recommendations for record keeping and some of the challenges that come with it. Peter will then take on and will go through some of the first steps you can take in becoming compliant and how we are approaching these projects for our customers. We'll reserve some time for Q&A, but feel free to ask questions during the session as well. I'll keep an eye on it and we'll ask questions when appropriate. So now let me hand over to Janika to talk about some of the industry record-keeping recommendations.
Thank you, Sulabh. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining today. I really wanted to point out and help set the scene around the record-keeping recommendations. So this started back in 2012 when the Prime Minister recommended we conduct an inquiry at the Royal Commission around institutional responses for child abuse and sexual abuse. It took 5 years to essentially conduct and produce a final report, which was released in 2017. And the Royal Commission essentially made 5 key recommendations. And one specific recommendation targeted around independent schools, implementing and maintaining a minimum standard for creating, maintaining, and disposal records relevant to child safety and well-being, including child sex abuse. So out of the 5 key recommendations, here they are today. Essentially, the first one is creating and keeping a full accurate record relevant to child safety and well-being, including child sex abuse. It is in the best interest of all of our children that should be an integral part of the institutional leadership, governance, and culture. And that's the first key recommendation. The second recommendation is around full and accurate records that should be created and document all incidents, responses, and decisions affecting child safety and well-being. And this also, again, includes child sexual abuse. The third recommendation is around recording relevant child safety well-being, including child sex abuse, should be maintained appropriately. So what is the process around maintaining those records? The fourth recommendation is around, again, relevant child safety, but this should be around the disposal of those records. So how do we make sure we're disposing of those records correctly? And they should only be disposed in accordance with law or policy. And the last recommendation is around individuals' existing records with a right to amend and annotate those records, giving us the ability to change those records as required. These 5 recommendations have essentially been made because there is inadequate records and record keeping practices that happen today for technology and process that have contributed to delays in failure or the identity to help respond to risks and incidents of child safety in schools today. So what's the challenge that we're facing? As most of you probably already know, many schools today use a variety and disconnected technologies as their document repository that do not meet the expected standards of record keeping as outlined in the final report. So that's a big challenge that we're finding today. How do we actually make sense of the solutions we have today to actually adhere to these standards? So how do schools go about consolidating systems and adopting new technology and the new set of principles around document and records management? That's probably the number one question we're finding from our customers is how do we go about doing it? There are some nuances in how records should be kept, how it's accessed by teachers and students. What is the transfer of data as kids move throughout the year levels within schools? How do we make sure that incidents that may happen with 2 students within a school be kept separate, but also linked together to make sure that we can sort of have a full picture. So that's the big challenge we're finding. There are some nuances in how we sort of manage these records. And then ultimately, how do we dispose of those information as well, those records when appropriate? That is the big challenge we're finding with most of our customers today. I'm sure most of you may have some questions, but I'll leave it there. That's hopefully should set the scene about the challenge we have. And I'm sure many of you today understand these challenges you're trying to solve. So I'll hand over to Pete now, who'll be able to take you through a little bit more in detail.
Thanks, Jenica. As Jenica mentioned, one of the first step in becoming compliant is making sure that you are able to control all of the documents about students in your school or faculty or teaching staff. To do that, you need to pull that information out of these disparate systems into the same system. So for that, we use Microsoft 365. The second step, once you've got a handle on all of the documentation around children and to do with the school, is to prevent things from being deleted accidentally. And there's an automated way that we can do that to make sure files are caught before they are deleted. So an end user might delete something, they believe it's gone, but in the back end, we've caught it and we've put it aside as an archive to retain that information for however long is necessary for that type of content. And we can define the rules around different types of content for you. So these are the first 2 steps. Make sure you're aware of all your information. It's in one place so that you can create rules to govern that information. And the very first rule that you put in place is for retention, to make sure that files aren't being deleted either accidentally or on purpose prematurely. With our work in schools, we've come across types of files that fall into 4 basic categories: student-related content, operational content, so that's keeping the lights on, paying people in finance, HR, and so on; faculty content, which is where teachers create the material that they'll deliver in the classroom; and then personal content. Everyone's got an H drive or their My Documents. So the files within a school fall within these 4 categories. Some of the common challenges that we see is there's a lack of effective use of the systems that are in place today. And in some cases, staff have taken things into their own hands and are using shadow IT and aren't even using the systems at all. What that leads to is it's a struggle to find information. And there's also security risks and vulnerabilities with content sitting outside of the bounds of the company's systems. So the company is not able to control them and let alone be aware of the content that's sitting in someone's personal Google Drive or something like that. So what this leads to, what we've seen is unnecessary costs, companies paying for tools that have overlap. They might be paying for Zoom as well as Teams. They might be paying for Google Workspace or Facebook Workplace as well as their Microsoft 365 licenses. So there's unnecessary costs there. As I alluded to before, there's lost data with people being able to delete things. There are no rules in place in some of these other systems or in the personal areas that teachers might use outside of the business. There's no way of preventing them from deleting data that needs to be kept. And the obvious admin overheads with running and maintaining all of these separate systems as opposed to having a single system. To maintain student-related data, what we're seeing, the work that we've done in previous projects is to create a document management system specifically for student information. That keeps all the information about students together in a single place, makes it really easy to respond to audits. If you need to retrieve all information about a student, it's all in one spot. It's very easy to find. Having everything in one place and doing it having it there in an ordered manner allows us to build out search, which is more advanced rather than just doing a file name search. We can have Microsoft returns results by looking inside the files and also any metadata tags that you have applied to files. So that there's more advanced search features that you can make use of. Navigating the DMS, we set document management systems up to be as easy to use as possible, as intuitive to use. In most cases, you get to a student's file in 2 clicks. You pick the cohort and then you pick the student, and you've got everything laid out in a set of folders that make sense for the way that your school works with the children. Saving files is obviously straightforward. If you can navigate through the system easily, you can save a file to the right location. And adding students through the year. This is not a system that's set up once and not touched again. There's an easy way to maintain and add students or remove students as they come and go throughout the year. In creating a centralized space for student files, we've also come across a common request, which is incident case management. While this is a completely separate area of the business, tracking when a child kicks a ball through a window or if students were caught smoking at the local train station and so on, it is inherently tied. The output of this system is tied to the DMS in that once a case is resolved, it's been investigated and it come to conclusion, the information that was gathered in that investigation needs to be stored with each student so that we have a crystallized view of the time that student spent at the school and everything that happened to them and everything that they did. Incident case management systems are also something that we create alongside these DMSs. You create an incident with a click, depending on the things that you fill out, the form that in creating that incident, permissions to access that incident are restricted to who should be seeing it, as opposed to all staff and teachers. While a case is active, all of the content to do with that case is stored centrally. There's no duplication of files. Everyone's working on a single source of truth as SharePoint and Teams are set up to function that way. All the students involved get a carbon copy of the content once a case comes to conclusion. Again, that's just to maintain a crystallized view of the student's experience at the school. And a list of all the cases can be exported to Excel if there needs to be reporting on cases throughout the year or across the years. Our approach in running projects with schools follows this general format. We gather requirements, talk to the teaching staff. We also talk to the principal, the managing body, the ELT. We upskill the people making decisions about these systems to make sure that they're aware of what the technology is capable of, and we bring them along the journey of designing the system in a way that suits them best. Knowing the system is our job. Getting the system to work for you is the point of the project, and there is an obvious overlap there with skills in what the system can do. So we teach people what's possible. We take them through the design. We then build the system and test it. There's always an aspect of migration in these projects, moving files from a file share or perhaps Google Workspace or other areas, Dropbox. Once the content's in the new system, we then train the teaching staff how to use this system, how to create a new counselor wellbeing meeting note or something like that. And then we go live with the new system so everyone's able to use it. The advantages that we bring are we've worked with primary and secondary independent schools for a number of years now, doing many projects like this. We've seen the different types of projects and the different shades of grey with each. We've built up a library of reusable content over this time, and we've practiced in rolling these projects out in performing the build activities and testing. So the time and cost involved with this is greatly reduced compared to doing it as a first type of job.
Cool. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and Janica as well. Before we take on questions, we've got about 10 odd minutes left. I have a couple of call to actions for you today. If any of you would like to discuss your school needs or would like to conduct a health check for your environment, please contact me directly or reach out through our website. I will have my contact details appear shortly when we begin the Q&A. The other thing I wanted to mention was, if you're interested in Tellus, it's a very popular Microsoft Teams governance product. We're rolling out to a number of institutions. If you'd like to learn more about it or would like to book a demo through our website, please do feel free to contact me directly. For those who are not that familiar with Tellus, many schools that are embarking on these projects that Peter just talked about, they're looking for these projects to better secure and manage information by leveraging Teams and SharePoint on Microsoft 365. This is where Tellus comes in, because it allows you to create best practice templates on Teams and SharePoint with appropriate security rules, classifications, and provides a single view of all of the teams in your organization with business information, such as which team belongs to which department, who is the business contact, which teams are actually in use, and more. We have plenty of resources available on Tellus, so feel free to go and check our website. There's a white paper there that you can go and download. You can also watch the explainer video. And like I said to you before, feel free to contact me directly if you'd like to discuss that further, or if you'd like to arrange a in-person demo. With that, I'd like to now open the floor for Q&A based on the discussion that we had with Janica and Peter. So feel free to type in any questions you have. I'll keep monitoring the chat. But just to kick things started, Peter, if you don't mind, just maybe letting us know, like, what are some of the benefits for a school in using Microsoft 365 to become more compliant?
Okay, give me an easy one to start. The licenses for M365 come with the desktop applications. So if you're using Outlook, Word, Excel, and so on, chances are you're already paying for Microsoft 365. The A1 licenses are free for teachers, faculty, staff, parents, and students. So you may not even be paying anything. Microsoft also gives education tenants unlimited storage, and it's very easy to integrate existing IT infrastructure with Microsoft 365.
Thanks, Peter. There's a question from John. What sort of licensing does this require staff to be on A3 or A5 for your solution? And I can answer that question. The core solution does not require you to be on A5 for that matter. Most of the schools we're working on have A3s. Some schools may even have A1, and our solution will work absolutely fine on A1. However, if there is additional compliance and security needs you have, and you'd like to implement those, then obviously we may need the additional license SKUs, which typically come with either A3 plus that licensing SKU, or you may have A5 already. So we can discuss those specifically with you, John. Depending on your requirements, we can make some further advice, some further recommendations to you on what sort of licensing you'd need. But to implement the core solution that Peter talked about today, you don't need the A5 at all. In fact, like A1 will work fine, just 2 as well. Question from Anna on what is the cost of Tellus. So it really depends on how many users you have on Teams at the moment, and this obviously varies greatly because we don't really license for, we don't count the cost of the students in our licensing. So maybe, Anna, I'll reach out to you. I'll have a bit of an idea about your school and your situation, and then I'll be able to provide you a better pricing for that. Question I've got, sorry, Pete, I've got another question for you. What are some of the most common challenges in implementing a project like this?
There are 2 that I can think of. One is that teachers don't have a great deal of time. They're in the office during school term and a little bit outside prior and post a term, but during school holidays, they're generally unavailable. So they don't have a great deal of time to learn a new system or to gather up files for that centralization, that first step that I talked about before. The second is there may be de facto standards in the office. This may relate to student files, or it might just be back-end, HR or finance, just internal content. But they're quite often we're seeing business rules and processes that are quite loosely defined. There's no formalized set of steps that everyone should be following. When someone comes on board, they just sort of learn the ropes through doing the job. They learn on the job. So having these in black and white, so to speak, makes the job of designing much simpler. We will cover this in the first set of workshops we hold in gathering requirements before we get to design, but that goes a lot more smoothly if the business knows or knows what they intend to do with types of content. So that doesn't have to be in technology terms. It's just we should be doing X with this type of document, and there's no need to say what product or technology needs to be involved there.
Cool. Thanks for that, Pete. Can you give us a sense of how long do projects like these take? Obviously, we've done quite a few of these. We've got some IP, but just to give everybody a sense of, how long these projects can take, can you give us a bit of a guide?
It's a little bit of how long is a piece of string there, but the discovery, design, and build can be measured in weeks. That's fairly quick. The testing and migration and training would be measured in months, I would say, purely because of availability, like I was saying before, with teachers' time. It's important to get them across the new system. It doesn't matter how functional. You can make the most functional system in the world, but if no one uses it, it's not very functional. So getting them across the new tools is as essential as getting the content into them.
Yeah. John's got a question there. Do you provide a solution that could do enrollment taking that would then feed documents into the DMS for future students, for example, birth certificates, medical certificates, etc.? Absolutely. So obviously we'll need to understand what sort of systems you currently use, whether you are using a student management system or you've got other systems in play. But even if I discounted those kind of systems, we can absolutely implement a pretty straightforward kind of a system that would allow you to kind of do, enrollments, capture the information around future students, and then obviously feed that in if the student is decides to enroll and those kind of things. So yeah, absolutely happy to take that further with you, John. Happy to discuss that further based on your specific needs. Another question for you, Pete. What are some of the first steps do you think a school can take to become more compliant?
Right, so make sure you know where everything is, even if it isn't in the same place. Make sure you've got business decision makers assigned to come up with the rules and enforce them, the business rules. Don't lump the responsibility on the IT department, because there's always a system involved with supporting these functions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that IT should be the one making a call about how long to keep a file. That's more to do with the compliance officer or the wellbeing officer in the school. So make sure you've got the appropriate people assigned to make the decisions, and keep things conceptual for as long as you can, and avoid talking about technology, because as soon as you bring systems and product names into the picture, it becomes a slippery slope, and you end up talking about them more than what you want to achieve. So divide and conquer. Like I said before, student, faculty, support, personal files, those four basic buckets. Define business rules for how content should be handled within each of those buckets, because there's going to be different types of content in each bucket. And stay focused on the end user experience, because like I said before, the staff's use or lack of use will be what decides if the system is a success.
Awesome. That's good advice, Peter. I'm conscious of time. We're almost out of time. If there are any last questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I've got one from Anna. When you do the discovery, do you have a best practice template so we know what we should keep where, that an independent school should have to be compliant with? We have sources of truth. We have source of truth databases that retain documents and information. Do you want to comment on that, Pete?
Best practice template. No, we don't. In terms of a boilerplate pamphlet that we can hand you, but we can cover what they are in calls directly after this. I know we're offering some free consultation as part of this webinar, but whether it's in those discussions or as part of the initial gathering of requirements, we'd lead you through that.
So just to expand on that, we don't provide basically out-of-the-box templates in this sort of case, Anna, but we do, like Pete has a lot of experience and a lot of best practices that come in implementing a solution like this. So once we have a chat with you, we understand your requirements better, then we'll be able to create a best practice template for you that you'll be able to then obviously go and implement.
The main thing there is that there are such variance between schools that it is a little bit difficult to create something that's meaningful, that is a best practice template. If I tried to make one now, it would be so generic. It'd sort of be, yes, of course we would want to do that, but how do we exactly do it? And that is dependent on each school.
All right, we're out of time. So thank you all for joining the call today. We do really appreciate it. I hope you got something out of it. Thanks, Janika and Peter, for your time and for sharing your insights and knowledge. You have my details on the screen. If you want to contact me for anything we've discussed today, or generally anything you want to know about what we're doing with schools, please feel free to contact me on email or through our website. And I'll reach out to some of you who have further questions so we can discuss those things in more detail with you. Thank you for joining today's session again. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.